Maintaining peace will never be an easy task. Neither will it ever be a finished task.
As someone who has championed peace on an international scale, what do you believe is the most pressing issue facing global justice today?
The ethical framework we lived with in the last century, and what we've continued to live with during these first 25 years of the new millennium, is deeply flawed.
In your life path and purpose, you followed the way of peace and diplomacy, which are by essence the expressions of love and compassion.
We need to build a culture of peace. And that is the responsibility of journalists, high school teachers, university professors, religious leaders, and politicians.
In your view, what are the three most essential qualities a leader should possess to effectively promote peace and justice in their community or countries? Hi everyone, I'm Mohsinaa Ahmad. Welcome to a captivating episode of Self-Discovery Podcast, where we bring you global stories of resilience, courage, and leadership, where we explore stories of leaders shaping countries and industries across borders and making a lasting impact on this world. Today we have a distinguished guest, and it is my honor to introduce Mr. Óscar Arias Sánchez, a transformative leader who has dedicated his life to peace, democracy, and social reconstruction in Central America. President Arias is not merely a former president, but a globally recognized humanitarian and Nobel Peace Prize laureate. His most remarkable achievement came in 1987 when he was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for his groundbreaking proposal to resolve the Central American crisis. President Arias courageously sought a negotiated solution that would remove foreign powers from the region, halt aid to anti-government guerrillas, and establish democratic principles. His plan and its core concepts profoundly influenced the peace settlements in El Salvador and Nicaragua in the early 1900s. Serving 2 terms as president of Costa Rica, duration 1986 to 1990 and 2006 to 2010, Mr. Arias has been recognized internationally with over 50 honorary degrees from prestigious institutions like Harvard, Princeton, and Dartmouth. He continues to be a beacon of hope, serving on the board of International Criminal Court's Trust Fund for Victims and championing humanitarian causes worldwide. Welcome, President Arias, to Self-Discovery Podcast. It's an honor to have you here sharing your views.
Thank you.
In your view, what are the 3 most essential qualities a leader should possess to effectively promote peace and justice in their community or countries?
I believe that what we're living through today forces us to rethink our ethics, not just focus on 3 qualities or virtues. What I believe is that the ethical framework we lived with in the last century, and what we've continued to live with during these first 25 years of the new millennium, is deeply flawed. I think the values that prevail in the world today are wrong. There's too much greed, too much individualism, too much materialism, and there's very little generosity, very little compassion, and very little love. The fact that we're entering a new arms race right now is proof that our values are not the right ones. As the Bible teaches us, in life, it is more important to give than to receive. And yet, what we see today is a tremendous selfishness, a tremendous greed, and that has to change. So, who's going to take responsibility for changing these values, for transforming this ethical mindset? I would say, all of us. School teachers, religious leaders, political leaders, we all need to make an effort. Because we have a long history, since the beginning of Homo sapiens, where wars have been seen as the best way to resolve conflict. And that thinking must change.
Great words there. So, as someone who has championed peace on an international scale, what do you believe is the most pressing issue facing global justice today?
Well, we've lived under that old Roman axiom that if you want peace, prepare for war. That's nonsense. It's idiotic. It has no justification. If you want peace, spend more on weapons and soldiers. That's not the way, as I said earlier. And that's exactly why we need new values. Because with new values come new priorities. And military spending should not be a priority for governments. Right now, global military spending is around $2.5 trillion. In English, that's 2.5 trillion. Instead of spending money on weapons and soldiers, we need to solve the real problems of humanity, the problems of our society. We need to spend on the obvious: more education, more healthcare, more culture, reducing poverty, and building the infrastructure that will allow for stronger economic growth and a better quality of life for our people. To me, the solution seems very simple. But with the values that dominate the world today, it's hard for people to even understand that instead of spending more, they should be increasing cooperation with the poorest countries. One of the most important issues today is migration. But without a doubt, we must make an effort to change our values. Because if we don't, military spending will continue to be a priority and nothing will change.
President Arias, winning the Nobel Peace Prize is a significant achievement. How has this recognition impacted your work and mission for peace, not just in Costa Rica, also beyond?
Well, Benjamin Franklin once said that to become conceited by knowledge is like being blinded by the light. And I believe that to become conceited by honors is the same, like being blinded by the light. The Nobel Prize is just one of many awards I've received, but I'm still the same person. Many people think that when someone is given the Nobel Peace Prize, they suddenly gain a lot of wisdom. But the truth is, that's not how it works.
Right. So tell me one thing, you have had 2 terms as president of Costa Rica. What do you consider your most impactful achievement during this presidency? And how does it continue to influence Costa Rica even today?
Well, during my second term in office, the priorities were different. It was no longer about seeking peace in Central America, because by then we had already silenced the guns. The wars were over. But my obsession, my deep desire to do something for all of humanity, never stopped being my priority as the president of Costa Rica. During my administration, we submitted a treaty, not a free trade agreement, but a treaty on the international arms trade, to the United Nations General Assembly. It was adopted in 2013 and entered into force in 2014. I say this with great humility. It was born at the Arias Foundation for Peace. It's what is now known as the Arms Trade Treaty, ATT, and today its secretariat is based in Geneva. I had another project as well. It was called the Costa Rica Consensus. I went to speak with the president of the World Bank, who at the time was Paul Wolfowitz. The Costa Rica Consensus said this: international banks, like the World Bank and others, should not lend money or forgive debt to governments that spend more on weapons and soldiers than on education, healthcare, or environmental protection. And Wolfowitz told me, "Mr. President, this isn't possible because we'd have to change the charter of the World Bank, and we don't have the votes to do that." So, ever since that second term, I've been deeply convinced about the need to reduce military spending. Today, 9 countries possess nuclear weapons. There are already more than 13,000 nuclear weapons in the world. And if just a few of them were used, humanity would be finished. As Albert Einstein once said, "I know not with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." So yes, reducing military spending should be a universal priority for governments around the world. But sadly, as I've said before, it's not.
Great words there. So, in your life path and purpose, you followed the way of peace and diplomacy. which are by essence the expressions of love and compassion. What message would you like to convey to the participants of Dubai Justice, Love and Peace Summit with regard to what efforts could be done at global scale towards achieving lasting peace?
We need to build a culture of peace. And that is the responsibility of journalists, high school teachers, university professors, religious leaders, and politicians. But unfortunately, that idea has remained a utopia, one I've been fighting for, almost alone. There are many NGOs around the world working against nuclear weapons, but there are no governments truly convinced of this cause. So yes, compassion and love should be the predominant values in today's world. Let me share something. My last dream, which I don't know if I'll ever see come true, is to build a museum of peace in Costa Rica. It wouldn't be the only one. There are other peace museums around the world, but in most other countries, the museums that claim to be about peace are actually museums about war. The only country that has the moral authority to build a true museum for peace is Costa Rica, the first country in the world to unilaterally abolish its army. As Francois Mitterrand once said, Costa Rica declared peace to the world. If you'll allow me, I'd like to close with some words I shared during my second presidency, when I addressed the United Nations Security Council in November 2008. Costa Rica held the rotating presidency at that time, and we invited heads of state from the 5 permanent members: Barack Obama, United States; Gordon Brown, United Kingdom; Nicolas Sarkozy, France; Dmitry Medvedev, Russia; Hu Jintao, China. And this is what I told them on that occasion.
In the year 1945, when the smoke of the worst war ever fought by humanity was still clearing, the founders of this organization wrote in Article 26 of the UN Charter, in order to promote the establishment and maintenance of international peace and security, with the least diversion for armaments of the world's human and economic resources, the Security Council shall be responsible for formulating, with the assistance of the Military Staff Committee referred to in Article 47, plans to be submitted to the members of the United Nations for the establishment of a system for the regulation of armament, with this small paragraph. Maintaining peace will never be an easy task. Neither will it ever be a finished task. But I can assure you that strengthening multilateralism, reducing military spending in favor of human development, and regulating the international arms trade are all steps in the right direction that was traced 63 years ago by those who, having survived barbarism, were still able to harbor hope. With those words, I finish my short speech to the leaders of the world, who are the ones responsible for this arms race that we are living today.
Beautiful words, so inspiring. So much thought process has gone in these times that you have written these lines. This is so amazing to end it. Beautiful words, Mr. Arias. Thank you so much for sharing this on this podcast with me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast interview are those of the guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the HT Media or the host. HT Media makes no representations as to the accuracy, completeness, currentness, suitability, or validity of any information in this video and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information, or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis. HT Media reserves the right to edit, modify, or remove content without notice. Any reliance you place on such information is strictly at your own risk.